Turning now to the world lead. In English, it translates to day of anger or day of rage, a blunt and yet extremely accurate way of describing the events in Egypt today. Police firing tear gas at supporters of deposed Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, and in many instances, it's not just tear gas, but live ammunition. 17 people have been killed just today in clashes between protesters and police, and 40 others have been wounded, according to state TV. Thousands of pro-Morsi protesters today amassing in the streets, undaunted after Wednesday's show of force against them by Egypt's government. On that day alone, Egyptian security forces killed at least 580 people when they raided two huge camps filled with Morsi supporters. There was also this extraordinary scene at one of Cairo's bridges. Protesters jumping and climbing off, trying to make it to the street in order to escape gunfire. The military overthrew Morsi and deposed his party, the Muslim Brotherhood, on July 3rd and installed an interim government. Morsi was democratically elected, but that allowed Islamic hardliners to hijack the 2011 revolution for their own means. If anything, life under Morsi was no better and quite possibly worse than under his predecessor, Hosni Mubarak, who led with an iron hand for 30 years. The Obama administration was no fan of Morsi and refuses to call his removal a coup, because that would mean it would have to cut off the $1.5 billion in aid that the U.S. gives Egypt every year, $1.3 billion of which goes to the Egyptian military. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki joins me now. Jen, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. The U.S. has provided tens of billions in aid to the Egyptian military over the years, mostly in the form of assets, weapons, and ammunition and the like. I guess the big question right now, as the world watches, is for the Americans, are supplies that the U.S. has given Egypt now being used to kill civilians in the street?
Well, Jake, first let me say that what's happening on the ground in Egypt, what we've seen over the past couple of days, is deplorable, is horrific. There are not enough adjectives to describe it, and you've heard the President and the Secretary describe it in that way as well. We're obviously looking very closely at our broad relationship with Egypt. You can't have business as usual when hundreds of civilians are being killed in the street. But we have a broad, enduring partnership and strategic relationship with Egypt that's been going on for decades. So that's why we're doing this review very carefully. We've taken some steps to cut off certain forms of aid, but we're continuing to review day by day.
But are American munitions that were given by the U.S. to Egypt, are they actually tools of slaughter? Do we know that one way or the other?
Well, Jake, obviously we're watching every event that's happening on the ground very closely. And regardless of where these tools are from, this is horrific, what is happening to civilians on the ground. And it certainly is not acceptable to the President, to the Secretary of State, to anybody in the administration. And we are evaluating and reviewing the events that are happening on the ground and the steps being taken by the interim government every single day.
All right. I don't want to waste your time or our viewers, but I'll respectfully note you're not answering that question. I want to move on and play you something that former State Department spokesperson P.J. Crowley, who used to work in the building that you're in right now for the administration you work for, what P.J. Crowley told me yesterday about the president's reluctance to call this a coup.
I think we missed an opportunity 6 weeks ago to call it a coup. The fact that we haven't undermines the credibility of the United States.
His basic argument is that if we had called it a coup and then held out the threat that we weren't going to give any aid, or actually started to not give any aid, and paved the way for the Egyptian military to get that aid back, we would have more influence. Do you think he has any point that he's making?
Well, obviously, Jake, these issues are being debated within the administration. But the reason that we continue to provide aid to Egypt is about a broad, long-term relationship that has to do with our own national security, regional stability, and Egypt has played for decades a very important role on that front, and our own belief that in order to help the Egyptian people and the country get back to a long-term and sustainable democracy, that it's important to continue to be a partner. So we look at all of those pieces as we're making these decisions. If these were easy decisions to make, we would have made them long ago. But our aid and our relationship is very important strategically to the United States.
And lastly, Jen, if you could give us any sort of update on the terror alert that was issued. My understanding is that almost all, if not all, of the U.S. embassies across the Muslim world have reopened. Does that mean that the alert is done and we are no longer fearful of this specific attack?
Well, we evaluate information that's coming in every day, and I do appreciate your question because there's been some confusion, especially in Egypt. We've had a travel warning in place there since July 3rd. We have updated it to ask American citizens to abide by the curfews that have been put in place. We still do not certainly support the state of emergency that's been put in place. But in other countries, we have reopened our facilities. They remain closed in Lahore, and we make decisions day by day. But our bottom line here is keeping American citizens safe, keeping visitors safe, keeping our personnel safe, and that's how we'll continue to evaluate.
Is the terror alert over, though? I mean, is it done?
Well, we continue to evaluate threats day by day. I can't speak to it more than that, other than to say that we felt comfortable enough to open up the posts that we opened up. There are some that remain closed, and we look at information as it comes in every single day.